The anime begins with our protagonist, Takuto, who is enjoying an online game from his bed, but after a few seconds, he loses consciousness. Slowly, he feels his mind drifting elsewhere, and when he opens his eyes, the first thing he sees is that he's in a place he's never seen before. But instead of panicking, he becomes quite excited at being able to breathe in the fresh air. That's when a woman approaches him to greet him, and he's astonished to recognize her as Atu. She confirms he's right and even calls him king. Here it's explained that while Takuto was sick, he used to play a 4X strategy game set in a dark fantasy world called Eternal Nations, and the character he adored most in that beloved game was this woman, Atu. Realizing it's really her, the first thing Takuto does is wonder to himself what he's supposed to do, curious if this is some kind of roleplay scenario. On top of that, he figures that if she called him king, she might think he's the leader of the Mynoghra. At that moment, Atu lets out a soft laugh and tells him to calm down. She then informs him that he managed to clear the nightmare difficulty using the hardest civilization to play, Mynoghra, the Ruin, and that he's the legendary player who shines at the top of the rankings, Takuto era. This leaves him in shock, and now Atu lets him know that she remembers everything too, referring to all the things he told her while playing, how they conquered the world together multiple times and all the times they died. She then asks him not to worry, as she can remember everything perfectly. After processing all this for a moment, Takuto mentions that his playstyle was centered around using her, and that perhaps he had hoped to reach the strength she possesses. That's why he's so happy to finally be able to talk to her in person. Atu tells him she feels the same, saying that being able to speak with him brings her immense joy. A few seconds later, Takuto wonders if he's in paradise, wanting to know if she's the one who brought him here. Atu replies that she didn't, and that when she woke up, she was already here, so she doesn't believe this is paradise. If she had to say something, she thinks they're in a world similar to Eternal Nations. After taking his hand, she tells him she's happy to meet him in person and asks if he wants to start over together. Here, she brings up the possibility that they're in a world like Eternal Nations, or maybe even the world he came from, and even though it's unfamiliar, she wants to build a kingdom together, just like they've done before. Takuto reflects on this, unsure of what's going on or where exactly he is, but since they're already together, he accepts the idea of doing it again, of reliving those happy days in this world. Now resolved, he tells her they'll build a kingdom together, a kingdom just for the two of them. This makes Atu smile with joy, though immediately afterward, she delivers an ominous line, introducing herself as Atu of the Mire, daughter of the mud who will destroy the world, and from now on, his body and mind belong to her. At the end, Takuto mentions that it's a little embarrassing, something Atu admits as well. Putting that aside, he tells her that she's his only subordinate and that she will be his advisor and right hand. In addition, their civilization is the most evil, but as a specialist in domestic affairs, she wants to remind him of what the Mynoghra always do first: isolate themselves. Later on, Takuto uses the emergency creation option to summon an insect-type scouting unit. They both agree that the creature is disgusting, but setting that aside, Takuto reminds Atu that Mynoghra is a peaceful civilization that rules over evil and ruin, something they must keep in mind as they act. In short, they must avoid being discovered by others, so they need to gather information without being seen. He then orders the long-legged insect to explore the surroundings, and to give it extra motivation, Atu warns it not to disappoint Master Takuto, which causes the insect to scurry away in fear. Seeing that, Atu confirms that the unit functions as if it were under her command, while Takuto realizes that he can share its vision, just like he did in the game. He then tells her that he spent 100 magic points to summon the long-legged scout, which means they have another 100 points left. Building the settlement that will serve as their initial base will cost about 20 points, so they can't afford to waste any. He also mentions that he would have liked to create a warrior unit to have military strength, but he can't afford to do that after summoning the scout. Atu declares that she'll work hard to be his military force, or at least she'd like to say that. Takuto notes that Atu, the heroine unit, will develop over time, but for now, her strength is just 3. That means they're at very high risk, since any encounter with the enemy could completely wipe them out, which leads Takuto to acknowledge that the difficulty level is truly high. Sometime later, Takuto remains focused on observing the surroundings through the long-legged insect's vision, gaining a better idea of where they are. With this, he confirms that for now, everything is forest, and he hasn't found any animals or monsters. Atu comments that forests are perfect for hiding, but it's strange that there are no animals. She also apologizes for not being very helpful at the moment. He tells her not to worry about that. Just having her by his side is enough for him. Those words make her incredibly happy, and seeing her reaction, Takuto realizes that he can now see her personality more clearly, something he hadn't been able to fully appreciate before. Suddenly, he discovers something important. Not far from their location, there's a dark elf community. Atu assumes it's normal in a fantasy world and says that dark elves are neutral but tend toward neutral evil, so that's a relief. Takuto wonders if that means they're in eternal nations, and also points out that it's problematic to have another settlement nearby, as it would be best to avoid war. Faced with this issue, Atu suggests they run away together, something he agrees to without hesitation. This is because in Mynoghra, they love peace and harmony. She supports that, even saying that war is for barbarians. Once they've made this decision, Takuto tells her that they'll first keep watch on the elves while scouting the surroundings, and if things go badly, they'll simply run. Atu happily accepts his orders, and as they cheerfully embrace this new plan, a few dark elves approach and stare at them in surprise. This is when we're shown what had been happening with the group of dark elves just moments earlier. One of them tells their leader, the warrior Jia, that they should leave these cursed lands and also wants to know why they're leaving the forest. Jia explains that they've been driven out of their homeland and have nowhere else to go. The children won't last much longer, and since there's vegetation in this area, he believes there might be food. Another elf, named Emla, mentions that at the edge of the uncharted territory of Isekai lies a vast, cursed forest, the Cursed Lands, and according to old books, something truly evil has been sealed in those lands, something that prevents life from flourishing. Jia just laughs at that, thinking it's nothing more than superstition, and points out how well the trees are growing here. He then urges them not to give up and not to throw in the towel, saying that their pride and the spirits of their ancestors will show them how to overcome these hardships, even though, deep down, he admits that this forest gives him the creeps. Minutes later, they come across Takuto and Atu, and their first reaction is to freeze in place, sensing something ominous from that strange being, Takuto. Jia even feels like he's staring at the very embodiment of evil, and realizes that whatever action he takes next could affect the entire future of his tribe, so he must be cautious. With that in mind, the first thing he does is kneel on one knee to introduce himself as a dark elf of the Mazaram clan, and that his name is Jia Nagiv, the chief warrior. He then acknowledges that the one before him is someone of great importance, and for that reason, he apologizes for entering his forest without permission. Atu maintains her role and subtly praises them for acknowledging their position, then asks the reason why they're here. Jia responds that Mazaram, his dark elf clan, once lived in the central lands of Isekai. Since he begins giving too many details, Atu intimidatingly orders him to get to the point. Feeling the pressure, Jia quickly explains that they were persecuted and driven out of their home, and that's why they've come to this forest. In his mind, he criticizes himself for trying to embellish their situation, feeling the fear that Takuto and Atu can instill. Suddenly, Takuto tells them that they look very thin, and Atu prompts them to explain why. Without wasting time, Jia says they've run out of food, and in trying to throw off those chasing them, they haven't been able to gather any supplies. They've been like this for several days. While Takuto thinks it over, Jia silently wonders why they have to suffer so much, and what they did to deserve this. After all, they only want a place where they can live in peace. Out of nowhere, something rolls toward him, and seconds later, more of them arrive, giving off a sweet scent. Takuto tells them to take it and asks if they know what apples are. They taste great when cut into rabbit shapes. After picking one up, Jia replies that they don't, as these fruits are very different from what they're used to. He hesitates, unsure of what to do, aware of how rude it would be to reject such an offering. Suddenly, one of the dark elves takes a bite and exclaims how delicious it is, prompting the others to do the same and agree enthusiastically. As if that weren't enough, Takuto tells them he also has pears, then opens a portal through which he tosses a few toward them. Atu then asks Jia what's going on. Her king is offering help, and yet he's doing nothing about it. What Jia does is press his forehead to the ground in a pleading gesture and tells them that there are more like him who have fled to this place. There are even small children who are starving. That's why, with all the kindness behind this fruit offering, he would rather give it to them than eat it himself. Takuto is moved with compassion, and without thinking too much, he begins summoning a pile of fruit in front of the dark elves. This causes Atu to grow slightly agitated. As the food continues to pile up, Jia reflects on how dark elves are scorned for having fled from the light. It's said that the clan of light merely tolerates their existence, forcing them to live in the shadows, far from the light. On top of that, no one had ever offered them help. So upon receiving such an abundance of food, he asks Takuto who he really is, though Takuto ignores the question and insists they take the food. We then see the other dark elves still waiting, trying to endure. And as if it were a miracle, Jia arrives to tell them he has found food. From there, they prepare it to feed the children, and everyone feels relief that they managed to hold on just a little longer. One of the girls asks Jia where he got so much food, and he replies that they found it by chance, though in his mind, he can't stop picturing that mysterious being. Later that night, the elder Moltar approaches him to congratulate him on a job well done. The fruit he brought is truly exquisite, But what he really wants to know is what actually happened. After a brief pause, Jia tells him he encountered a legendary creature deep within the forest, and that, if he remembers correctly, Emily once mentioned something being sealed in the Cursed Lands. Moltar supposes it must be the King of Ruin, saying that there are still old legends and ancient books that speak of him. According to the writings, when the world reaches its limit, the King of Ruin will appear, bringing doom to all and forcing the world to start over from scratch. Moltar then says he doesn't know if that information is true, but he can't say for certain that it's a lie either. Jia also clarifies that the being never gave them his name, and he considered him so fearsome that it might very well be true that he is the King of Ruin himself. In his opinion, that being seemed beyond their understanding, however. A young woman served him and explained the king's words. Moltar comments that, even though they don't know for sure if he really is the King of Ruin, what he does know for certain is that he's not a good person. Now that he's eaten and recovered some of his magic, he can see things more clearly, and he's sure of one thing: this forest is not normal, and he should have realized that sooner. He then asks Jia what he gave in exchange for the food. But when he hears they gave nothing, he mocks the idea no evil being would ever give something for free. Jia explains that they simply answered his questions about their situation, nothing more, and he believes His Excellency helped them out of pure compassion. Because of this statement, Moltar suggests that Jia must have been bewitched by that evil being. He can't understand why Jia would speak of him so respectfully. Jia reminds him that they were starving and that in the face of a miracle like this, it's only natural to show respect even if it's to an evil being. It was that or die. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Moltar apologizes for the misunderstanding and tells Jia that he will go negotiate with this king himself, as it's his responsibility as their leader. Back with the other two, Atu scolds Takuto for wasting magic to summon all that food, but he replies that he felt sorry for them. She scolds him for giving such a simple excuse and reminds him that their civilization has only just been born, and they don't even know what surrounds them yet. Because she pouts in frustration, Takuto tells her he's willing to do anything she asks as compensation. She sees that as a bit too much, so she calms down and tries to rephrase her words more gently. As soon as Takuto tells her that he needs her, she completely changes her attitude to show him her absolute loyalty. Putting that topic aside, he brings up a problem he had. He couldn't communicate properly with the Dark Elves. It turns out that although he can speak normally with Atu, his words don't come out right in front of others, all because he's not good at communication. While he sinks into a bit of a depression over it, Atu does her best to cheer him up, and the long-legged insect watches them silently.